The dust settled in the great arena of Varkesh Prime, and 50,000 spectators held their breath. Corporal Dae-ho Kim stood in the center of the combat circle, his plain gray uniform soaked with sweat. Across from him, the champion Varex the Undefeated lay on his back, struggling to breathe. The massive Draconid warrior's chest heaved as his forearms clutched at nothing. His tail, thick as a tree trunk, twitched weakly against the stone floor. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The silence was so complete that Dae-ho could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. The arena was built into the side of a mountain, open to the purple sky of Varkesh Prime. Stone seats rose in tiers, filled with delegates from every corner of the Galactic Coalition. There were Draconids with their scaled skin and multiple limbs. There were Phylixians who looked like great cats that walked upright. There were Centaurans with their blue skin and telepathic abilities. There were dozens of other species, each one sending their best warriors to prove their strength. And then there were the humans. 20 of them, sitting in a small section near the bottom of the arena. They were the newest members of the Coalition, barely accepted 3 years ago. Their planet Earth was considered backward. Their technology was primitive. Their bodies were weak compared to almost every other species. Most Coalition members thought humanity had been admitted out of pity, not merit. Dae-ho had changed that opinion in less than 10 minutes. The fight had started like everyone expected. Varex had towered over the human, nearly 3 meters tall to Dae-ho's modest 170 centimeters. The Draconid scales were as hard as armor, evolved over millions of years to withstand attacks. His forearms meant he could strike from multiple angles at once. His tail could break bones with a single swipe. He had fought over 200 matches in this arena and won every single one. When the match began, Varex had charged like an avalanche. His roar shook the arena walls. His 4 fists moved in a blur that would have killed most opponents in seconds. But Dae-ho wasn't there when the fists arrived. He had moved 1 second before Varex attacked, sliding to the left in a motion so smooth it looked like water flowing. Varex's massive fist struck empty air where Dae-ho had been standing. Then Dae-ho did something nobody expected. He didn't run. He didn't try to stay away from the dangerous champion. Instead, he moved closer, much closer. He stepped inside Varex's reach, where those long arms and that powerful tail couldn't generate full force. What followed was 7 minutes of combat that would be studied in military academies for generations. Dae-ho fought like he could see the future. Every time Varex threw a punch, the human had already moved. Every time the Draconid tried to grab him, Dae-ho slipped through his grip like smoke. But the human wasn't just defending. He was learning. With each exchange, Dae-ho seemed to understand Varex better. He found the small gaps in the champion's defense. He noticed which leg Varex favored. He saw how the Draconid's breathing pattern changed when he grew tired, and Dae-ho used all of it. He struck at nerve clusters where Draconid anatomy was vulnerable. He used leverage and angles to make Varex's own strength work against him. When the champion tried a tail sweep, Dae-ho didn't jump over it. He jumped onto it, using the momentum to launch himself at Varex's center of mass. When Varex tried to crush him with all 4 arms, Dae-ho twisted in a way that made the Draconid's arms tangle with each other. The crowd began to whisper, then murmur, then shout. In the 6th minute, Dae-ho landed a strike at the base of Varex's skull, exactly where the Draconid's spine connected to the brainstem. It wasn't a hard hit. It didn't need to be. The champion's legs buckled. His vision blurred. His sense of balance disappeared. Varex fell. The undefeated champion of the arena hit the ground with a crash that echoed off the stone walls. The referee, a neutral Centauran official, rushed forward. He checked Varex's condition. The Draconid was conscious but unable to stand. The match was over. Winner, Corporal Dae-ho Kim of Earth, the referee announced. That was when the silence had fallen. That was when 50,000 beings from across the galaxy tried to understand what they had just witnessed. High above the arena floor, in the command platform reserved for military leaders, General Korvax rose from his seat. The Dragon General was a legend among the Draconid Empire. His scales were marked with scars from 1,000 battles. His 4 eyes had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. He was old enough to remember when the Coalition was just 3 species instead of 47. Korvax descended from the platform using his personal gravity harness. He landed in the arena with a thud that cracked the stone beneath his feet. His presence made the crowd fall silent again. When a dragon general moved, people paid attention. He walked toward Deho with slow, measured steps. Each footfall echoed across the arena. His tail dragged behind him, leaving a line in the dust. When he reached the human, he looked down at the small warrior who had just defeated his people's greatest champion. Deho stood at attention, his breathing finally returning to normal. He met Korvax's gaze without flinching. The general's 4 eyes studied him with an intensity that made lesser beings uncomfortable. "You fight with knowledge, not just skill," Korvax said. His voice was deep and rough like grinding stone. "You knew Varex's weaknesses before the match began. You understood Draconid anatomy better than most Draconids. You anticipated his moves like you had fought him 100 times before." Deho nodded but said nothing. "This is not natural talent," Korvax continued. "Natural talent shows itself in aggression and instinct. What you displayed was education, training. Someone taught you how to break down an opponent, how to study, how to learn." The general leaned closer. "Who trained you, human? What secret master did your species hide from the coalition? What military academy produces warriors like you?" The entire arena waited for the answer. Surely this human had been trained by some legendary fighter. Perhaps Earth had secret combat schools hidden away. Perhaps there was a warrior tradition that humanity had kept concealed until now. Deho turned and pointed toward the human delegation section. His finger aimed at a small woman sitting in the 3rd row. She wore simple civilian clothes, a plain jacket, and comfortable pants. She wasn't watching the arena. She was reading something on a data pad, her face calm and focused. She looked like a teacher or an office worker, not anyone connected to the military. "Her," Deho said clearly. "Librarian Borahan taught me everything I know." 50,000 beings stared at the woman. She didn't notice at first, too absorbed in whatever she was reading. Then another human tapped her shoulder and pointed at the arena floor. She looked up, saw the crowd staring at her, and offered a polite smile and a small wave. General Korvax's 4 eyes narrowed. His tail stopped moving. For a long moment, he simply stared at the librarian, who didn't look like she could hurt anyone, much less train a warrior who defeated Varex the Undefeated. "Impossible," someone in the crowd whispered. But Korvax had lived too long to dismiss the impossible. He had seen too many battles won by unexpected factors. If this human said a librarian trained him, then perhaps librarians on Earth were something very different from what the word suggested. "I want to meet this librarian," Korvax announced. His voice carried across the arena. "I want to understand what she knows. I want to see what methods she used to create you." Deho nodded.
"She'll talk to you, General."
"She talks to anyone who wants to learn." General Korvax looked back at the small woman in the stands. She had already returned to reading her datapad, apparently unconcerned with the chaos her student had just created. Something about that calm confidence made the ancient warrior feel something he hadn't felt in decades. Uncertainty. 15 years earlier, in the city of Seoul on Earth, a 12-year-old boy named Deho sat in the children's section of the Metropolitan Library. He held a cold pack against his left eye, which was swollen and turning purple. His lip was split and his knuckles were scraped raw. 3 older boys from his school had cornered him on the way home. Again. The library was quiet except for the soft hum of air conditioning and the occasional whisper. Tall windows let in afternoon sunlight that made dust particles dance in the air. Rows and rows of books stretched toward the ceiling. It smelled like paper and floor polish and that particular scent that only existed in libraries. Deho liked it here. Nobody bothered him in the library. Nobody called him weak or pushed him around. He could sit and read and forget about the bruises. "Fighting again?" a gentle voice asked. Deho looked up. A young woman stood beside his chair, wearing the simple uniform of a library assistant. Her name tag read, Borahan, Junior Librarian. She looked to be in her mid-20s, with kind eyes and a concerned expression. "I didn't start it," Deho muttered. Looking away, "I didn't ask who started it. I asked if you were fighting." Bora pulled over a chair and sat down beside him. "How many times this month?" 5, Deho admitted. "And how many did you win?" "None." Bora nodded thoughtfully. She didn't offer sympathy or tell him fighting was wrong. She just sat quietly for a moment, thinking. Then she stood and walked to a nearby shelf. She ran her finger along the spines of books until she found what she wanted. She pulled out a thin volume and brought it back. "This is a book about leverage," she said, placing it on the table. "Physics. It explains how a small force can move a large object if you apply it correctly. She went back to the shelf and grabbed another book. This one is about human anatomy. It shows where the body is weak, where nerves cluster, where pressure points exist. Another trip to the shelf. This one discusses animal behavior and aggression patterns. Why creatures fight and how they fight. She stacked 6 books in front of Daeho. Start with these. Read them carefully. Then come find me. Daeho stared at the stack. These aren't fighting books. No, Bora agreed. They're learning books. Fighting is just applying what you learn. She smiled. Come here every day after school. I'll show you something interesting. And Daeho did. At first, he didn't understand what Bora was teaching him. She never showed him how to throw a punch. She never demonstrated a kick or a block. Instead, she gave him books. So many books. Books about physics and biology and psychology. Books about history and strategy and philosophy. Books about sports medicine and biomechanics and decision-making under stress. Why am I reading about ancient Chinese military strategy? Daeho asked one day, frustrated. This happened thousands of years ago. Because the principles don't change, Bora explained. Sun Tzu wrote about using your enemy's strength against them. That principle works whether you're commanding armies or facing one bully. Read it, understand it, then think about how it applies to your situation. Slowly, Daeho began to see the connections. The physics book taught him about momentum and force distribution. The anatomy book showed him vulnerable points in the human body. The psychology book explained how people react to fear and anger. The history book demonstrated how smaller forces defeated larger ones through better strategy. Bora didn't just give him books. She taught him how to learn from them, how to take information from one subject and apply it to another, how to observe patterns, how to analyze problems from multiple angles. Learning isn't about memorizing facts, she told him during one session. It's about building a framework for understanding. Once you understand the fundamental principles of something, you can adapt those principles to solve new problems. When Daeho turned 13, the bullies tried to corner him again. This time he didn't lose. He didn't win exactly, but he made them work for it. He used the angles Bora had taught him to study. He aimed for the vulnerable points he had read about. He stayed calm like the philosophy book suggested. The bullies left with confusion and bloody noses. They never bothered him again. It worked, Daeho told Bora excitedly the next day. Of course it worked. You learned the principles and applied them. She pulled more books from the shelves. Now you're ready for the next level. These are about strategy in complex situations. These are about reading body language. These are about different cultural approaches to conflict. The years passed. Daeho came to the library every day after school. Later, even after he graduated and enrolled in the military, he came whenever he had leave. The library became his real education. Bora became his real teacher. She never claimed to be a martial artist. In fact, she told him directly that she had served briefly in the military but only in administrative work. She had never seen combat. She had never trained as a soldier. Then how do you know all this? Daeho asked when he was 16. Bora gestured at the thousands of books surrounding them. Because people who did know wrote it down. Fighters and soldiers and tacticians and scientists. They recorded their knowledge so others could learn from it. I just know how to find that knowledge and help you understand it. She showed him how she organized information, how she cross-referenced subjects, how she identified reliable sources versus questionable ones, how she traced ideas back to their origins and forward to their applications. Humanity's greatest advantage, she told him, isn't our strength or our speed. It's this. She tapped the side of her head. Our ability to learn. But more importantly, our ability to record what we learn and pass it to the next generation. Every human starts from where the last generation ended. We build on accumulated knowledge. When Daeho turned 18 and enlisted properly in Earth's military, Bora gave him a gift. It was a small digital reader loaded with thousands of texts, military manuals, scientific papers, historical accounts, philosophical treatises. The galaxy is big, she said. You'll meet species we know nothing about. But they'll have written about themselves. They'll have academic papers and cultural texts and scientific journals. Read them, study them. Understand them. That's how you'll win. Not by being stronger, but by learning faster. Daeho took the reader. Why are you doing all this? Why spend years teaching me? Bora looked out the library window at the city beyond. In the sky, Barely visible in daylight were the first orbital platforms that would eventually connect Earth to the rest of the galaxy. Humanity was about to step onto a much bigger stage. Because they're going to think we're weak, she said quietly. The aliens. When they see us, they'll see small bodies and no natural weapons. They'll think we're easy to defeat. She turned back to him with a serious expression. I don't need to teach you to fight, Deho. I need to teach you how to think. Let them underestimate the species that conquered knowledge before it conquered space. 10 years later, when Deho stood in the arena on Varkesh Prime facing Varix the Undefeated, he thought about all those hours in the library, all those books, all those lessons about learning itself. He had studied Draconid physiology from their own medical journals. He had read about their warrior culture from their own historians. He had analyzed their fighting styles from combat footage available in public databases. He had synthesized information from dozens of sources to understand exactly how Varix would fight and how to counter it. Bora had been right. The galaxy underestimated humanity. They saw weak bodies and assumed weak minds. They didn't understand that humans had been building systems to accumulate and share knowledge for thousands of years. They didn't realize that every human could potentially access the collected learning of their entire civilization. After the fight, after General Korvax demanded to meet his teacher, Deho sent a message to Bora. She replied with characteristic simplicity. Tell him to bring questions. The library is open to everyone. General Korvax's ship descended toward Earth 3 days later, and Deho wondered what the ancient dragon general would make of a simple librarian in Seoul. He wondered if Korvax would understand that Bora Han was, in her own way, the most dangerous human alive. Not because she could fight, but because she knew how to teach anyone else to do so. The dragon general's ship landed in Seoul on a gray morning. Rain fell softly on the landing pad as General Korvax emerged, followed by 6 of his elite guards and 3 coalition observers. The Draconid general had been prepared for many things. A hidden military base, a secret training facility, perhaps an underground complex where human warriors learned their mysterious skills. What he found was a library. The Seoul Metropolitan Library stood in the middle of the city, a mixture of old and new architecture. Glass and steel additions wrapped around the original stone building that was over 2 centuries old. People walked in and out freely, carrying bags and readers, chatting quietly. Human children ran up the front steps. An elderly woman sat on a bench reading a newspaper. It looked completely ordinary. This cannot be correct, one of Korvax's guards muttered in their native language. There must be a hidden facility beneath it. But scans showed nothing unusual. It was exactly what it appeared to be. A library, a building full of books and people reading them. Bora Han met them at the entrance. She wore simple clothes, a comfortable sweater, and practical pants. She carried a tablet under one arm. She looked like any other librarian in the building, which is exactly what she was. General Korvax, she said with a polite bow. Welcome to the Metropolitan Library. I've prepared a conference room where we can talk. Though I must ask that your guards maintain silence in the reading areas. We have students studying. The absurdity of the request struck everyone. A librarian was asking a dragon general's elite warriors to be quiet. In any other circumstance, it would have been insulting. But Korvax found himself nodding. We will respect your rules. Bora led them through the library. They passed room after room filled with shelves. Books in physical form and digital access points lined every wall. Humans of all ages sat reading, working, learning. Some glanced at the alien visitors with curiosity, but most simply continued their work. The conference room was simple. A large table, comfortable chairs, a display screen on one wall. Nothing special. Bora gestured for them to sit. You have questions, she said. Please ask them. Korvax leaned forward, his massive frame making the human-sized chair look tiny. How did you train Deho? What methods did you use? What techniques did you teach him? I never taught him techniques, Bora replied calmly. I taught him how to learn techniques. There's a difference. One of the coalition observers, a Phylixian warrior named Rakesh, made a dismissive sound. Impossible. Combat requires muscle memory, reflexes honed over years. You cannot simply read about fighting and become a warrior. Bora smiled slightly. You're correct. Reading about fighting won't make you a fighter, but reading about physics, anatomy, psychology, strategy, and dozens of other subjects gives you the tools to understand fighting at a fundamental level. Then with relatively modest physical practice, You can apply that understanding. She activated the display screen. It showed a list of books and papers. These are some of the materials I guided Deho to study over 15 years. Medical journals about draconid physiology, published by your own doctors. Historical texts about draconid warrior culture, written by your own scholars. Combat footage from arena matches, publicly available. Physics papers about leverage and force distribution. Psychology studies about decision-making under stress. The list went on and on. Hundreds of sources. Thousands of pages of information. Everything here is publicly available, Bora continued. Your species published all of this information. I simply taught Deho how to find it, understand it, and synthesize it into useful knowledge. But you have no combat experience yourself, Korvax stated. He had checked her military records. You served briefly in administrative duties. You never fought, that's correct. I'm not a warrior. I'm a librarian. Bora stood and walked to the window looking out at the city. General, let me ask you something. How do you train your warriors? We begin training at age 5, Korvax replied. Young draconids learn from masters who learned from their masters. The knowledge passes down through generations of direct teaching. By age 20, a draconid warrior has trained for 15 years under expert guidance. And those masters teach what they were taught? Yes, the traditional forms, the proven techniques. Bora turned back to face them. That's oral tradition. It's how most species develop expertise. It works, but it has limitations. Knowledge can be lost if a master dies. Techniques can drift over generations. Innovation is slow because each student must relearn everything their teacher knows. She gestured at the library around them. Humans developed a different approach thousands of years ago. We write things down. We record knowledge in forms that don't require the original expert to be present. Every generation doesn't start from zero. They start from where the last generation ended. A young human can read the wisdom of masters who died centuries ago. But reading is not doing, Rakesh insisted. True, Bora agreed, which is why I also taught Deho how to practice efficiently. How to identify which physical skills were essential and focus training time on those. How to use video analysis to correct his own form. How to create feedback loops that accelerated learning. This isn't magic, General. It's methodology. Korvax was beginning to understand, but he needed to see it. Can you demonstrate? Can you show us this process? Of course. Bora tapped her tablet. I have a student coming in an hour. Her name is Jiwon Park. She's 16 years old and wants to join the space fleet. She has no combat training whatsoever. You can watch one of our sessions. An hour later, they stood in a study room watching Bora work with the teenage girl. Jiwon was nervous at first, seeing the alien observers, but Bora's calm presence steadied her. Today's problem, Bora began, is this. How would you defeat an opponent who is twice your size, has longer reach, and is stronger than you? I don't know, Jiwon admitted. That seems impossible. It seems impossible if you try to match their advantages, Bora said. So we won't. We'll find different advantages. Let's start with research. What do you think you need to know? Together, they began working through the problem. Bora didn't give answers. She asked questions that led Jiwon to think through the issue herself. She pointed the girl toward resources. A paper on leverage physics, a video about wrestling techniques used by smaller fighters, a study about reaction time differences based on body size, a historical account of how a smaller army defeated a larger force. Over 3 hours, Korvax watched Jiwon transform a seemingly impossible problem into a solvable one. The girl synthesized information from multiple sources. She developed her own approach based on understanding principles, rather than memorizing moves. She created a strategy that used her opponent's size and strength as disadvantages rather than advantages. By the end, Jiwon had outlined a fighting approach specifically designed for smaller people facing larger opponents. It wasn't perfect, but it was sophisticated and well-reasoned. Now she would practice the physical elements, Bora explained to the observers. But she wouldn't practice blindly. She would practice with understanding. She would know why each movement works, what principle it exploits, how to adjust it for different situations. That understanding makes practice vastly more efficient. Korvax sat in silence for a long moment. His 4 eyes studied Bora with new understanding. You didn't create Deho as a special warrior. You created a method that could make any human into a strategic fighter. Yes, Bora said simply. Deho is exceptional in his dedication and discipline, but the method itself is replicable. Any human with intelligence and willingness to learn can do what he did. It just takes time and guidance. The implications hit everyone in the room like a physical blow. One exceptional human warrior was surprising. A method that could create thousands of them was terrifying. "How many humans know this method?" asked one of the coalition observers. "Currently, about 50,000 are trained in it," Bora replied. "But we're expanding it. Earth's government wants to integrate these learning approaches into our education system. In another generation, every human child might grow up learning this way." Rakesh, the Phylixian warrior, looked disturbed. "You're building an entire species of strategic thinkers." "We're teaching humans to use the advantage we've always had," Bora corrected gently. "Our evolutionary strength isn't our bodies. It's our brains and our ability to share knowledge across generations. For most of human history, we survived not by being the strongest, but by being the smartest, the most adaptable, the best learners." She looked directly at General Korvax. "You bred your warriors over millennia. You created traditions of combat excellence. That's impressive. But humanity built libraries instead. We created systems for accumulating and distributing knowledge. Now we're simply applying those systems to new challenges." General Korvax stood slowly. His tail moved in a pattern that indicated deep thought among his people. "This changes everything. If humanity can train civilians to challenge our warriors in months, what can your actual military accomplish?" "I don't know," Bora said honestly. "We're still learning what we're capable of. But I can tell you this, we will keep learning. We will keep improving our methods. And we will share what we discover, because that's what humans do. We build on each other's knowledge." The Dragon General looked around the library with new eyes. He saw it now not as a simple building, but as a weapon more dangerous than any gun or ship. A weapon that turned information into power and made that power available to anyone willing to learn. "I need to report this to the Coalition," he said quietly. 3 months after visiting the library in Seoul, General Korvax stood before the Coalition Military Council. The chamber was enormous, built to accommodate representatives from 47 different species. Some sat in chairs, some on heated platforms, some in tanks of water. All of them were military leaders, the finest strategic minds their civilizations could offer. "This is unprecedented," declared Admiral Vortheim of the Centauran Dominion. His blue skin flickered with patterns that showed his skepticism. "You're asking us to gather here because of a human librarian?" "I am," Korvax replied firmly. "Because what she represents is a threat we never anticipated." The chamber filled with murmurs. "A threat? From a species whose physical capabilities ranked near the bottom of the Coalition?" Korvax activated the central display. It showed footage of Deho's fight against Varex. "You all saw this match. What you didn't understand was how it was possible. The human wasn't stronger or faster. He was better educated." He spent the next hour explaining what he had learned from Bora, the systematic approach to learning, the synthesis of information from multiple sources, the rapid adaptation that came from understanding principles rather than just memorizing techniques. "They can take our own published research and use it against us," Korvax concluded. "Every medical journal, every cultural study, every historical account we make public becomes a tool for them to understand and counter us." "Ridiculous," scoffed General Thane, a massive Phylixian with scars across his feline face. "Reading books doesn't make you a warrior. Our fighters train their entire lives. We have traditions spanning thousands of years." "I thought the same," Korvax admitted. "Which is why I arranged a demonstration. The human government has agreed to participate. If the council approves, I propose we conduct a test." The proposal was simple but shocking. 50 human civilians with no combat training would study for 6 months using Bora's methods. Each would focus on a different coalition species. Then they would face actual warriors from those species in controlled combat trials. The council erupted in debate. Many called it a waste of time. Others worried it would embarrass the coalition when the humans lost badly. Some saw it as an opportunity to prove that human methods were overrated. Eventually, curiosity won. The test was approved. 6 months later, the trials began at the Coalition Military Academy, a massive orbital station above Earth. The academy trained officers from across the galaxy. Its combat facilities could simulate any environment. Its medical bay could handle injuries to any species. 50 humans arrived, looking nervous. They ranged in age from 20 to 60. There were teachers, accountants, engineers, artists. One was a chef. Another was a musician. None were soldiers. Across from them stood 50 coalition warriors. These weren't champions like Varix, but they were trained fighters. Each had at least 10 years of combat experience. Each was confident they would win easily. The trials were simple. One-on-one matches in a standard arena. First to land 3 clean hits won. Non-lethal force only. Medical team standing by. The first match began. A human accountant named Hajun stepped into the ring. His opponent was a Phylixian warrior named Korath, who moved with the fluid grace of a predator. The Phylixian had claws, fangs, and reflexes honed by millions of years of evolution. The match lasted 8 minutes. Korath won as expected, but he didn't win easily. The human accountant made him work for it. Hajun had studied Phylixian fighting techniques from archived training videos. He had read about their physiology, their instincts, their cultural approaches to combat. When Korath attacked with typical Phylixian aggression, Hajun was ready. He didn't match the aggression. He redirected it. Korath won, but he left the arena with new scratches and a surprised expression. The pattern repeated through the first day. Coalition warriors won most matches, but the humans performed far better than anyone expected. They lost, but they lost while adapting, learning, making their opponents adjust tactics. On the second day, something changed. The humans had watched recordings of their first matches. They had analyzed what worked and what didn't. They adapted their approaches based on what they learned. A human teacher named Minho faced a Draconid warrior. This time the human won. He didn't overpower the Draconid. He outthought him. He exploited patterns the warrior didn't know he had. He used techniques synthesized from multiple fighting styles that the Draconid had never encountered before. The coalition observers stirred uneasily. By the third day, humans were winning almost half their matches. The coalition warriors were better trained, stronger, faster, but the humans were learning at an incredible rate. Every match taught them something new. Every loss was analyzed and converted into knowledge for the next fight. How is this possible? Admiral Vortheim demanded, watching a human musician fight a Centauran warrior to a draw. 6 months of study shouldn't be this effective. Bora, who had been observing quietly, finally spoke. You're watching accelerated learning in action. Each of these humans studied your species intensively. They know your physiology better than most of you know it yourselves. They understand your cultural assumptions about combat. They've analyzed hundreds of hours of footage showing how you fight. And most importantly, they synthesized all that information into practical strategies. But they still lack experience, General Thane protested. Real combat isn't academic. True, Bora agreed. Which is why your warriors still win more than they lose. Experience matters. But you're missing the point. These are civilians. They had 0 combat training 6 months ago. Now they're competitive with your trained warriors. Imagine what they could do with another 6 months. Or 5 years. Or 15 like Deho had. The observation deck fell silent as the implications sank in. Now imagine, Bora continued quietly, what happens when our actual military recruits learn this way from the beginning. When we integrate these methods into all our training programs. When every human soldier learns not just how to fight, but how to learn about any opponent rapidly and exploit that knowledge. General Korvac spoke up, his deep voice somber. She showed me something in Seoul that I need to share with all of you. This isn't just about combat. Humans have weaponized education itself. They've created systems that let each generation start from where the previous one ended. They build on accumulated knowledge faster than any species we've encountered. They cheat evolution, a Centauran observer said bitterly. No, Korvax corrected. They understood something we didn't. Physical evolution is slow. Cultural evolution, knowledge evolution, can be incredibly fast if you have the right systems. Humans created those systems thousands of years ago when they invented writing. They've been refining those systems ever since. The trials continued for 2 more weeks. By the end, the humans were winning more matches than they lost. Not because they became stronger or faster, but because they learned faster. They identified patterns. They adapted strategies. They taught each other. The 50 humans shared knowledge among themselves, multiplying the effect of each individual's learning. The final demonstration was the most disturbing. Bora brought in a completely new volunteer, a young man named Sungho who knew nothing about combat. In front of the council, she spent 1 hour teaching him about one specific opponent, a Draconid warrior who had volunteered for the demonstration. 1 hour of study. Bora showed Sungho videos of the Draconid fighting. She walked him through anatomy charts. She explained 3 specific vulnerabilities and suggested 2 strategies to exploit them. Then Sungho entered the arena. He lost, but he landed 1 clean hit using exactly the technique Bora had described. After 1 hour of study, a complete novice had struck a trained warrior. This is your real advantage, Korvax told the council afterward. Not individual humans like Daiho, but the system that created him. A system that can potentially be applied to every human in their civilization. They're not just breeding better warriors. They're building better methods to create warriors. And they share those methods freely among their entire population. Admiral Vortime looked at Bora with something like fear. How many humans could you train this way? All of them, Bora replied simply. That's the point of education, it scales. 1 master warrior can train perhaps 50 students directly in their lifetime. But 1 good educational system can train millions, and those millions can improve the system for the next generation. A Felixian counselor stood abruptly. The coalition must restrict human access to our cultural and scientific databases. If they can weaponize our own information against us, too late, Korvax interrupted. Decades too late. Humans have been accessing our public databases since they joined the coalition. They've been reading our journals, watching our training videos, studying our histories. The information is already out there. Restricting it now would only signal our fear. The chamber descended into heated debate. Some called for limiting human expansion. Others suggested humans be removed from the coalition entirely. A few recognized that such actions would only make humanity an enemy instead of an ally. Finally, Bora spoke again, her quiet voice somehow carrying through the chaos. Or you could learn from us. The chamber fell silent. We're not your enemies, Bora continued. We're offering to share our educational methods. Imagine Draconid warriors who combine their traditional training with systematic learning approaches. Imagine Felixian fighters who enhance their instincts with strategic analysis. You don't have to choose between your ways and ours. You can integrate them. General Korvax looked at her thoughtfully. You would teach other species your methods? Knowledge shared is knowledge multiplied, Bora said. That's always been humanity's philosophy. Yes, we'll maintain an advantage because we've been perfecting these systems for thousands of years. But a galaxy where everyone thinks more clearly, learns more efficiently, and shares knowledge more freely, that benefits everyone. The council adjourned to consider her words, but General Korvax already knew what his answer would be. 5 years after the trials at the Coalition Military Academy, the galaxy looked different, not in obvious ways. The same species still controlled the same territories. The same ships traveled the same routes. But something fundamental had shifted in how the galaxy thought about power. They called it the Library Protocol. Not an official name, but the one that stuck. It referred to humanity's approach to education and knowledge distribution, and how that approach was slowly spreading to other species. Borahan stood at the window of her new office, watching spacecraft come and go from the orbital platform above Sol. She had been promoted, though she insisted she was still a librarian at heart. Her official title was Director of Knowledge Integration for Earth's Department of External Relations. In practice, she did what she always did, helped people learn. Her office was part of the new Earth Knowledge Center, a massive facility that connected to hundreds of libraries across the planet. But it also connected to alien institutions across the coalition. The center facilitated information exchange on an unprecedented scale. A chime announced a visitor. Bora turned from the window and smiled. General Korvax entered, ducking slightly to fit his large frame through the doorway. 5 years of regular visits had made them, if not friends exactly, then respectful colleagues. Director Han, Korvax greeted, using her official title, though she had asked him many times to just call her Bora. General, here for your monthly review? Yes, and to discuss expansion. Korvax settled into a reinforced chair designed for Draconid visitors. The first generation of integrated training is showing remarkable results. Young Draconid warriors who combine traditional methods with your educational approaches are outperforming their predecessors by significant margins. Bora nodded. This wasn't surprising. The pilot program had been carefully designed. Draconid military traditions were ancient and effective. Adding systematic learning methods didn't replace those traditions. It enhanced them. The elders want to expand the program, Korvax continued. They want to integrate these methods into our entire educational system, not just military training. That's ambitious. Are they ready for the cultural changes that come with it? Korvax's tail moved in a pattern that indicated uncertainty. That's what concerns them and me. Your methods don't just change how we learn. They change how we think. Young draconids who study this way ask more questions. They challenge old assumptions. They think independently in ways that make traditional leaders uncomfortable. Yes, Bora said gently, that happens. Education creates critical thinkers. Critical thinkers question authority. It's not comfortable, but it's necessary for growth. Some of my people fear we're becoming too human. Bora shook her head firmly. You're becoming more educated. That's not the same as becoming human. Draconid culture is thousands of years old. It has tremendous value. But culture can evolve without being destroyed. You're not losing your identity, you're expanding it. She pulled up data on her display. Look at the Centaurans. They adopted these methods 3 years ago. Their telepathic abilities actually enhanced the learning process in ways we never anticipated. They took what we shared and made it uniquely theirs. The Phylixians are doing the same, integrating rapid learning with their enhanced reflexes. Every species adapts the methods differently. Korvax studied the data. But you maintain an advantage. Yes, Bora admitted. We've had thousands of years to develop these systems. We have infrastructure others are just beginning to build. But the gap will narrow. In a few generations, other species will match us in learning efficiency. Some might exceed us. That doesn't threaten us. It's the point I don't understand. Why share your greatest advantage? Bora was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Because a galaxy full of educated, thoughtful beings is safer for everyone, including humans. Ignorance breeds conflict. Knowledge breeds understanding. We're not trying to dominate the galaxy, General. We're trying to live in it peacefully. The best way to do that is to help everyone think more clearly. A notification appeared on Bora's display. I have a new student arriving. Would you like to observe? You might find it interesting. They walked through the center's corridors. The facility was filled with beings from across the galaxy. Humans worked alongside Centaurans, Draconids, Phylixians, and dozens of other species. Some studied alone. Others collaborated in mixed species groups. The quiet hum of learning filled the air. In a small classroom, a young Draconid child waited nervously. He looked perhaps 8 years old in human terms, his scales still bright with youth. When he saw General Korvax, his 4 eyes widened. General Korvax, the child exclaimed in accented but clear human language. I know you. You're the dragon general who learned from the humans. Korvax's imposing expression softened slightly. What is your name, young one? I am Krill, sir. My parents sent me here to study. And what do you wish to learn? Krill's earnest answer came without hesitation. Everything. Bora laughed softly. That's ambitious. But it's a good place to start. Come, Krill. Let's begin with what you're most curious about. Over the next hour, Korvax watched Bora work with the young Draconid. She didn't lecture. She didn't impose. She asked questions that led Krill to think about his own learning process. She showed him how to find information. She taught him how to evaluate sources. She helped him make connections between different subjects. It was the same method she had used with Deho 15 years ago. The same method that had spread across Earth and now reached across the galaxy. When the session ended, Krill left with excitement glowing in his young eyes and a reading list on his datapad. That child will change things, Korvax observed. Him and millions like him growing up with these methods from birth. That's the hope, Bora agreed. Not just on Earth, everywhere. They walked back toward Bora's office. On the way, they passed a memorial wall. It displayed names and images of people who had contributed to humanity's educational traditions. Ancient philosophers and modern teachers, scientists and librarians, all the people who had built the systems that now spread across the stars. We should add your name there someday, Korvax said. Bora shook her head. I'm not special, General. I'm just a librarian who showed people how to use their library. The real heroes are the ones who built the libraries in the first place. The ones who decided that knowledge should be preserved and shared, not hoarded. Back in her office, Bora's communication system chimed. It was a message from Deho. He was now a captain commanding a mixed-species ship on the Coalition frontier. His message was brief. Taught my crew your methods. We work better than any pure species team in the fleet. They're calling us the learning ship, making you proud, I hope. Bora smiled and replied, already proud. Keep learning, keep teaching. That's the mission. General Korvax prepared to leave but paused at the door. I have a question that's bothered me for 5 years. Why did you really do this, all of it? Training Deho? Sharing your methods with the galaxy? What's your actual goal? Bora looked out at the stars visible through her window. Ships from 100 worlds traveled between them, carrying people and information in equal measure. When I was young, she said slowly, I read about Earth's history. Wars over religion, resources, ideology, millions dead because people couldn't understand each other, couldn't see other perspectives, couldn't think past their immediate assumptions. She turned to face Korvax. Then we discovered the galaxy wasn't empty. We learned we were one small species among many. And I thought, we can repeat our mistakes on a galactic scale, or we can try something different. Education. Understanding, Bora corrected. Education is just the tool. Understanding is the goal. If a Draconid warrior takes time to understand human thinking, he's less likely to see us as inherently threatening. If a human student learns about Felixian culture, she's less likely to fear or hate them. Knowledge doesn't guarantee peace, but ignorance almost guarantees conflict. Korvax's 4 eyes studied her with the intensity that had made him a legend. You're trying to change the galaxy's nature. No, I'm trying to give the galaxy tools to change itself. Every species has wisdom worth sharing. Every culture has knowledge worth preserving. The tragedy would be if we stayed isolated, each species learning only from themselves, repeating the same mistakes their ancestors made. She gestured at the busy center around them. This is how humanity survived long enough to reach the stars. We shared knowledge. We built on each other's work. Now we're just doing the same thing on a bigger scale. And if someone uses your methods to become a threat, if knowledge is weaponized against you, it already has been, Bora said simply. Every species that learns our methods becomes more effective at everything, including war. But I believe educated beings make better choices than ignorant ones. Not perfect choices, but better ones. It's a risk worth taking. General Korvax nodded slowly. The Coalition Military Council is voting next month on making educational exchange a formal requirement for membership. Species that want to join must share their knowledge and adopt protocols for systematic learning. It will be controversial. Change usually is, Bora replied, but necessary change happens anyway. After Korvax left, Bora sat at her desk and looked at the requests waiting for her attention. A Centauran university wanted help establishing a new library system. A Felixian military academy requested consultation on integrating learning methods with their traditional training. 3 human colonies needed teachers trained in advanced educational techniques. The work never ended, but that was fine. Learning never ended either. Her communication system chimed again. This time it was a young human girl from a colony world, asking about applying to the Knowledge Center's training program. Bora read the girl's essay about wanting to teach, to help people understand each other, to make the galaxy a little bit better through education. Bora sent her acceptance immediately and added a note. Welcome to the greatest mission in the galaxy. Bring questions. Outside her window, ships continued their eternal dance between the stars. Inside those ships, beings from different worlds worked together, learned from each other, built something new from their combined knowledge. The galaxy was big, but libraries were bigger, and as long as beings were willing to learn, willing to teach, willing to share what they knew, then perhaps anything was possible, even peace. Especially peace, because peace, Bora had learned long ago, was just another word for understanding. And understanding began with the simple question that had started everything. 15 years ago in a soul library, when a bruised boy had asked for help, and a librarian had taught him how to learn. That question, that willingness to learn, was spreading across the galaxy now, one student at a time, one library at a time, one species at a time. And somewhere in the Coalition fleet, Captain Deho Kim looked at his mixed species crew and remembered his teacher's words. Let them underestimate the species that conquered knowledge before it conquered space. They didn't underestimate humanity anymore. And that, more than any weapon or strategy, was humanity's real victory.